A great example of an amplified organization that KnowledgeWorks is very fond of, because we fund it, is called the New Technology High Schools. And we consider them amplified organization because it's a one-to-one computer program that all of the learning, or all the acquisition of their projects, is project-based learning, is done through an open source portal that the network of teachers have access to. So if I create a project unit in Ellsworth in Sacramento, California, and I have a colleague who's in Albany, New York, and also needs to do an Ellsworth project, and the standard is similar to the one in California, or I can kind of remix it or change it, I can go look at that project and use it for my class. Very big example of amplified organization. They're also connected to each other across the different network, as I talked about, and then the students are always on the computer, and that's how they do their work. They don't always use textbooks. They might use the digital resources available through them. That's how they get their kind of project requirement. The students work in teams of 4. There's no direct instruction because it's project-based learning. Instead, the teacher is a coach. The teacher is a guide. The students reflect and give feedback to each other on how well they did on a project, and that goes into their grade. The students reflect and give feedback to the teachers on how well they thought the project went for them and how the teacher might be able to improve that. And then the teacher also scores them on rubrics and traditional kind of exams and other areas of work, a lot of performance assessment on basically 21st century skills. And so one of the reasons why KnowledgeWorks funded it is we were looking at our map and we were looking at our future investment, and this reflected what the map was saying. So you also see examples that many of you are very familiar with. I'm sure many of you know of TeacherTube. You know, basically take off of YouTube, and teachers are trying to use that as a way to do professional development. I know that the coaches for New Tech, they sometimes videotape each other doing something at a school, and they load it onto TeacherTube. Many of you have heard of Moodle, which is an open source learning platform. New Tech did not create their learning platform on Moodle, but because of some of the really high-end quality of some of these open source collaboration activities, we might actually transition to using some of the open source tools out there as opposed to some of the kind of proprietary hardware and software we were using before. And then some of you may have heard Flat Classrooms. It's a takeoff of Thomas Friedman, and it's how students study about globalization through the internet virtually with other students across the schools. So the question becomes, how will public schools become amplified organizations that embrace new leadership structures and models of learning? Have you ever seen a more top-down place in a district or a school? At the same time, this is very consistent with what good schools should look like. The #1 rule is distributed leadership. Teachers should have multiple roles. But we have not done that very well across all our schools, and we certainly haven't done that where we feel we can empower our students and really have them be part of this distributed kind of learning process. So how do schools become comfortable in engaging in a culture of contribution, connectivity, and sharing collaboration? How does the system or services support teachers in doing this? Imagine a district suddenly opening themselves up and becoming more transparent and communicative with the community, as we've always hoped. But look at the opportunities that exist now. The next one we're going to move to is more of a bit of a downer in some ways. It's about systems. It's what we call platforms for resilience. And as we have all seen in every single newspaper and every news hour, that we're living through a pretty big series of shocks and disruptions in the areas of energy, finance, climate, healthcare, auto industry, you name it. We've got a lot of key forces of destabilization in this century. This driver essentially suggests that these system shocks will continue, and that the existing systems are too brittle to withstand the kinds of uncertainties and challenges we are facing. So, as a result, institutions will need strategies for flexibility, innovation, and collaboration if they hope to survive and thrive. Today's institutions must become platforms for resilience. This term resilience is taken straight from the ecological system. It's really the way that plants and animals are able to generate new patterns that adapt to complexity. So imagine a forest fire. The new growth that comes after a forest fire is really quite fantastic. As opposed to the kind of growth that happens when you basically do a clear-cut forest. So essentially, will you be one of the plants that survive after the fire? Will you be one of the plants that can adapt to the environment and grow within a burned environment? So again, I said this could be a bit of a downer, but this driver of change actually suggests new environments for a learning ecosystem that's going to evolve, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities for innovation. The key for this, though, is what I talked about, was that you have to be modular, you have to be flexible, you have to consider how you can become part of the learning grid, a networked, modular learning infrastructure. One example is the Open University in the United Kingdom that I'm sure many of you have heard of. It has one of the most premier distance learning, open entry, open university programs in the world. And it's basically created to have a dynamic learning experience in a very low-cost way where peers can help each other and where everyone is working towards achieving their higher education. Another example of modular and flexibility programs that fit into a learning grid: dropout recovery programs, reading intervention programs, online professional development programs. An explosion of learning platforms. Think about iTunes University. Think about expanding the possibilities for developing anytime, anywhere, ad hoc learning, given the platforms, if you can, so to speak, plug and play into basically a learning grid. There's a robust learning landscape, an interrelated connection of learning resources, organizations, and places. How do we all connect to each other and become more modular? How does the whole become better, or how do we contribute to the whole and not have to be the whole, essentially? Another way that you're going to see a response to platforms of resilience is the creation of shadow schools, or we might call these shadow services in this case. Shadow schools or services might just be provisional learning systems enabled by a growing learning economy. Shadow schools will challenge the centrality of today's school as the primary organizer of learning, or the public system as the primary system. So this is an example of the hole-in-the-wall education program. This is actually in India, and somebody went and decided just to try putting some computers into an open space and seeing what kind of opportunities people would use this in an open forum in a public space. So India's hole-in-the-wall provides residents with the opportunity to walk up to computer screens situated in a public wall, quite literally, allowing anyone to explore computer tools, applications, and online environments. And this was, again, done originally in New Delhi. Another example of maybe not a shadow school, but maybe a shadow system. If you guys have been watching what's going on in Los Angeles, when the mayor, Anthony Villagroso, became the mayor of Los Angeles, he made education a big priority for his administration. But do you think he worked within the school system, even though he hired Raymond Cortines, one of the most famous superintendents? It's pretty hard to work in that large system. It dwarfs most state systems. So in response to wanting to work within an inflexible top-down system, the mayor, along with key partners, created with 18,000 students, 1,500 employees, and they serve as the largest non-district school operator in the Los Angeles. The partnership has significant authority, freedom, and flexibility from LAUSD to transform schools. They do have a small connection to a division called I-Division, Innovation Division, within LAUSD. But when you hear people talk about the partnership schools, it is clear it is not part of LAUSD.